as we continue on considering the faith of Abraham, the life of Abraham, uh, promises to Abraham, and those promises that are still in force today. We see another place here in Abram's life, um, here in Genesis 14, and this is a problem area that Abram is in right now. And so from chapter 14 through chapter 19, this continues to be a problem until the Lord brings judgment there, and it affects Abram here, but it also affects particularly Lot and his family. And we see that in Lot's life. Lot, the last time Lot and Abram divided, and Lot goes down. As I said, I believe it was probably, of course, the needed thing is the Lord would remove Lot kind of from the picture, because Abram had a bad habit of trying to work out God's plan for him, trying to work out God's promises for him. And so there's no doubt that he was hoping that maybe Lot would be his seed after him, that there'd be Lot that the Lord would carry this out with. And of course, Lot is removed from the picture kind of in chapter 13. Abram has to go and save him here in chapter 14. And then we see again in chapter 19, after what takes place in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah there, Lot kind of, we don't see about Lot again as far as the story is concerned. He's removed from the picture there. But after Lot, of course, is out of the way, Abram, well, here's Eleazar of Damascus. He's my servant. Lord, you can use him. Let him be my seed after me. And Lord, no, that's not what you're going to have, a seed of your own, Abram. And I'm giving you. Well, okay, then if that's the case, then we're going to have to work this out. How's this going to be worked out? And Sarah comes up with a plan, and Abram sees that he thinks that's a pretty good plan, and so he follows her advice and has a son by another woman, and Ishmael is born. And there's still trouble because of Ishmael even to this day. And of course, after Ishmael, no, that's not what I'm going to do, Abram. I'm not going to use that to fulfill my promise. I'm giving you a son by Sarah, and his name will be Isaac. And of course, God works out his plan. He works out his promises. He doesn't need us to fulfill it for him. He will accomplish it exactly. And so I think that's kind of the reason that Lot is separated from Abram here in chapter 13. We come to chapter 14, and this particular chapter in Abram's life here is often dismissed by many. It was in the past, particularly, saying that Canaan did not have such a thriving society during the time of Abram. However, as is always the case, when the academia, I guess is the word to use there, tries to correct the scripture, it always bears itself out that they are wrong, and the scripture proves itself true. Archaeological evidence has shown the civilization was very robust at the time of Abraham, and it also shows a violent upheaval took place in the Dead Sea region during the time of Abram, and which was the destruction of the cities of the plain, which takes place in chapter 19, when Sodom and Gomorrah and those cities of the plain were destroyed there. And so this was a very large society, many tribes, many cities that were in the land at that day. And I'd venture to say it was probably more crowded during the time of Abram than it even is today, probably. But we have this story given us here, this narrative here of some trouble that arises here in Canaan, and Abram is kind of forced to be a part of it. because of Lot. I don't see Abram getting involved in it otherwise in this narrative and how it's told us here. I don't see him being involved in it had it not been for Lot. But it's another way in which God is fulfilling the promise of making His name great, especially when we see the victory God gave Abram here. And it's quite remarkable. We don't focus on it that much. We look at a lot of these other battles that's given to us in the scriptures, like Gideon, for instance, and his battle there against the Midianites. We have Samson fighting the battles that he fought. We see Jonathan and his battle against the garrison of the Philistines, and we see those kind of battles, and we often focus attention on those. And this is one that really is, as far as those battles are concerned, the miraculous nature of them is on par with all the rest of them in the victory that God gave to Abram here. It tells us, beginning in verse 1, it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. So they're there in the valley of the Dead Sea. This is where this battle takes place. It is believed to be where these cities of the plain were, and we really don't have a good location on all of these cities, because when God destroyed them, He destroyed them, and in that destruction, if anything is left, it's very little that's left, and so it's hard to determine what is what in that region where it's believed these cities are, in fact. Of course, we'll get more of this in chapter 19 in the destruction of the cities. There are balls of sulfur that are all over the land there. And they're about that big around, and they're stuck in the dirt all over the place. Just these balls, and you can light them on fire to this day, and they will burn. They'll burn up there right in front. I mean, it stinks and burns there, but those balls are stuck all over the place, and it fits right along with the description of the fire and brimstone that God rained down on those cities during that destruction in chapter 19. And so this, where these cities are located, as I said, there's very little there. Some have even suggested perhaps that these cities are even under the Dead Sea. That what remnants are left of them is actually under the sea. The sea having rose over the years and actually covered the cities. I don't know. But there's very little evidence of um, very little remains of these cities there that are left, and even if you have the remains of the city, you probably wouldn't be able to determine which city it was because of the destruction that came against it. But those cities of the plain were in that valley there of the Dead Sea. This is where this particular battle took place. As these kings from the east have come down to bring these cities of the plain back into subjugation, because as it'll tell us here, the particularly the king of Sodom decided he wasn't going to be subject anymore to these kings, and he rebelled, or would rebel against them. Now Amraphel, the first one that's made mention of here in verse 1, is believed by many to be Hammurabi, and we've heard of Hammurabi's law. Hammurabi was the king of Mesopotamia, but according to dating, he would actually come a little later, according to the dating, and so unless there's something that they've got dating wrong in this, it wouldn't be Hammurabi. But They've been known to get their dates wrong before, so that wouldn't be too far-fetched. But there are many that still believe that Amraphel there is Hammurabi. Uh, um, but he is the king of Shinar, which is the same place there that Hammurabi was king, in the plain of Babylon there. Admah, we see there we see these other kings there with him: Amraphel of Shinar, Arioch of Elasar, and Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations. These made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. These are all cities, again, that were in the Dead Sea region. Admah and Zeboim, for instance, are two of those cities, and they are made mention of in Hosea chapter 11 and verse number 8, that speaks of these particular cities. Now they had gathered here, verse 3, all these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. So they had gathered together as confederates against Chedorlaomer and this group that comes down with him here in verse 1. And simply because they were no longer going to be subject to him. Perhaps they thought they had amassed enough wealth and amassed enough army and amassed enough weapons and so on, they'd be able to hold him off. And so they had been subject to him 12 years, and on the 13th year, no, we're not doing that anymore. So they rebelled against him, refused to make their tributary payment, and so he comes down to bring them back into line. And he brings some folks with him to help him fight against them. So this is a great army that comes down to fight against probably another great army there in the valley of the Salt Sea there, with these 5 cities there that are gathered together to fight against Chedorlaomer. And it tells us there that in the 14th year, verse 5, in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him. And as he comes down to the valley of the Salt Sea, he's destroying all these nations as he comes along. And this is the reason we know this is a great army that's coming down here now, because he's destroying these tribes and defeating these tribes that would cause many people problems before and later on. In fact, it's these very nations or these very tribes that are brought up by the nation of Israel when the 12 spies come in and spy out the land. This is some of those very tribes that they've made mention of here, that these folks are a problem here, because these that are mentioned, particularly in verse 5, are tribes of giants that are in the land of Canaan, that Chedorlaomer and his army come in and defeat as they come down to go to the Salt Sea to fight against Sodom and Gomorrah. And so it mentions these names here. The 14th year came Chedorlaomer, the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims, which is believed to be the I can't say it right, Zumzimums, I think, Zumzimans, a word similar to that. That was a tribe of giants. It's believed to be the same tribe there. That's in reference there in Ham, and the Emims in Shavah Kirithaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to Emishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. And they went out, the king of Sodom, and there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim. So Chedorlaomer and his army come through, and they're destroying every tribe, every group they come against, including these tribes of giants. that they would fight against. And these giants would cause them trouble later on there in the land of Canaan. And so this is quite an army that's coming down to fight against Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain here. And so they are having success all the way down to the valley of Siddim there, and they come into battle here with these kings of the cities of the plain. And it says with verse 9, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5, and the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. So they are going into battle. They're in the valley, and there were slime pits there. Some believe it's like tar pits. Whether or not, well, I don't know, but their armies got stuck in them, and so they pretty much got overwhelmed, getting stuck in these slime pits, and they run to the mountains. What was left of their army run to the mountains to hide, to get away. And it says they took all the goods, verse 11, they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals and went their way. And so they came in, raided the cities. Chedorlaomer and his crowd, they come down, raid the cities. They take all the goods, they take all the food, they take all the gold, they take all the silver, they take all the flocks. They take a bunch of people with them, even as slaves, and carry them off back to the north and east, to come back into their own lands, back over into the plain of Shinar there in that direction. And they took, verse 12, they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. There's where they messed up. they would have been just fine if they'd left Lot there. I believe Abram gets involved here because of this. And again, I believe this is God fulfilling his promise to Abram, that he was going to make his name great. This is a great army that's come down with Chedorlaomer. I mean, these folks are hardened battleground soldiers that have come into this land. They're destroying tribes and cities as they come down. They destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah as far as the army that came out against them. They raid the cities, they loot the cities, they carry everything back out from these cities that they've destroyed, and they're carrying it home. And not only did they take that, but they took slaves with them, and Lot, Abram's nephew, is one of them that is carried away captive. Now, it says verse 13, and there came one that had escaped. And told Abram the Hebrew. By the way, this is the first time that name is used to describe Abram or any of his descendants after him. Here, Abram the Hebrew. They come and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. And so he had those around him that were his buddies there in the land. It says, when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. So he goes all the way over to the north and east, to the Jordan River there, and he's chasing them down, these kings that had come with Chedorlaomer. He's got 318 servants. Now, these other kings are mentioned here, verse number 12, that were confederate with him, so perhaps they sent soldiers as well. I don't know. It doesn't mention them particular, it just says they were confederate with Abraham. So they were on his side, in other words. But what they contributed, I don't know. But Abraham had 318 trained soldiers in his home that came with him to fight. And they pursued these armies and these kings up to Dan, chased them down. Verse 15, and he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So Abram and his 318 go and whip Chedorlaomer, this army that had come down and beaten the giants as they come into the land, had destroyed these other cities and these other tribes as they come into the land, had destroyed the armies of Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain, and Abram and his 318 go chase them down, defeat them by dividing himself against them at night and attacking them from different directions. He goes down or goes up, I should say, and defeats them and runs them off and brings all of the stuff that they'd taken back with him, including the people. And so he rescues Lot and his family and brings all of these goods and all of these things back down with him. It says in verse 16, and he brought back all the goods and also brought again his brother Lot and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And so Abraham has a great victory here. And we see there his faith in the Lord's protection there of him. Because he had no qualms here about going and fighting this army to go rescue Lot. We don't see any fear at all mentioned here concerning Abram, what he was about to go do. He got his 318 and said, all right, boys, let's go get them. And they went out to fight these kings and brought back all of these things, brought back these goods, brought back Lot and his family, and brought them back to the cities of the plain and restored them there. We're going to hold off here in our study in this particular passage, because in the next passage, next section here, verse 17 down through verse number 24, we come into an interesting part here of Abram's faith. And that is the meeting with Melchizedek here after he returns. Abram brings all of these things back down to the land, and the king of Sodom particularly, wants to reward him and bless him. Instead, Melchizedek comes and ministers to him there. Abraham pays tithe to him there. And so we have an interesting exchange that takes place that we'll look into concerning Abram's faith here in this next section. We see this area is a problem for Abram, and it will continue to be a problem for Abram, and particularly for Lot. The Bible tells us in 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 8 that Lot was vexed daily. Righteous Lot was vexed daily because of the wickedness of Sodom and what was going on there. His soul was vexed daily, and we seen him as he pitched his tent toward Sodom. We find here he was there at the city, being carried away captive. The next time we see him, we'll find him in the city as well. In fact, in the next time we see him, he'll be actually a judge in the city, sitting at the gate of the city, making judgment there. And so this is going to be a problem for Lot, and going to cause him great strife, great destruction comes upon him because of him dwelling in this wicked place, Sodom. and it's we have here Abram confederate with these to go back and to rescue all of this, but it's not because he's on Sodom's side, but rather just simply to rescue Lot. That was its purpose. And of course, God would use this to indeed make Abram's name very great in the land, and continuing to fulfill that promise of him and for him as he would face these problems that would arise in the land, even in the land around him. So this Abram with his 318 were given a great victory there against these tribes and these kings that had come in, and I believe it was a seemingly a very big army, a vast army that had come in to bring this destruction that Abram's given a great victory over. And this is all about God fulfilling His promise to Abram. It wasn't nothing going to happen to Abraham there because God had too many promises He was going to fulfill for him. So he knew Abram had faith there. We see that the Lord was on his side in this respect, and so Abram's given a great victory as he would go against those kings of the east. Next time we'll see that meeting with Melchizedek. All right, let's all stand. We'll be dismissed.